This is Writing It, the podcast about academics and writing. I'm Rachel Gordon. Here we aim to make the process of writing and publishing a bit more transparent and a bit less overwhelming. Through conversations with editors and academics at all stages, from full professors to graduate students, independent scholars, and postdocs, we share stories, lessons, and helpful habits from our writing lives. We're really excited to get to speak with Claudia Rizzini, the Executive Director of the Fellowship Program at the Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study. Claudia, the website says that this fellowship program annually selects and supports artists, scholars, and public intellectuals who bring both a record of achievement and exceptional promise to the Institute. And since most of our listeners are academics, I'm curious what this means for academics. How many academics are you choosing a year?
It's right. We welcome, I would say, 50 fellows in different disciplines. They're scholars, artists, scientists, and public intellectuals. And they come from across the world, from different institutions throughout the United States and the world. And the majority of the fellows are in academic areas like the humanities, social sciences, nonfiction writing, and journalism. Few more are in the science, mathematics, and engineering. And then we have about 20% of the class, which is artists and independent, public intellectual independent scholars.
Okay, so are you trying to, or who is doing the selecting actually of these fellowships?
So because we have so many disciplines, our selection process involves about between 400 and 500 reviewers who can be either expert reviewers, i.e. they review the applications which are, very specific in their domain, in their discipline. And then we have other reviewers who instead are involved in a more general conversation about applicants who may not be in their specific discipline. They still are. So if it's a discipline in the humanities, still someone in the humanities, but it may not be, English literature or, So we have many different committees, and what happens is that applications go through 3 rounds of review, and by the end of the review process, more than 50 people are completely, qualified and deserving of the fellowship. And so other parameters come into consideration as we build the class of fellows.
Are you looking to put together a cohort or class that somehow fits? I can't actually remember if you guys have a theme.
Yes, that's indeed very relevant. So the Radcliffe Fellowship is obviously part of the Radcliffe Institute. And the Radcliffe Institute has some focus areas. So one that we always have, which reflects the unique history of the Radcliffe Institute, is a focus area in women, gender, and society, and or work that draws on the Schlesinger Library, which is the largest collection of books and artifacts of women in America. Additionally, over the years, we have focus areas that can last 3 to 5 years. So we're just wrapping up next year with a focus area on climate justice. And we will continue with one that we have started last year, which is in academic freedom and connecting across differences. So in answering your questions, whether we build a class around theme, so we do. These are the teams that we have. But I would say that a large portion of the fellows that we welcome are in many, many different other areas, and we accept applications in all the disciplines that are listed on the website. There is no, we're not bound by our focus area. That would limit too much the scope of the research that the fellows do.
And what are the expectations for fellows during their year at the Institute?
So there are a few requirements. The first one is that fellows reside in the Boston and Cambridge area, which is a big ask for people who come from, around the world. But we definitely see the benefit of the residency. We ask fellows to restrict their professional obligations and limit travel so that they can be really, truly present and participate in the fellowship. We ask that they attend the orientation sessions, which take place the first 2 weeks of the fellowship. This is not, full-time orientation, but it takes a big chunk of those 2 weeks. And we also require that they attend the 2 weekly fellows talks that are followed by lunch. And these, we really require this, and we actually ask that if a fellow is absent for more than 2 weeks, they report it to the executive director. And that is because the talk with the question and answer at the end of it and lunches are really the fuel of the fellowship experience. This is where, conversation that really change the fellows' work sometimes happen. And so we really are, we really care that people attend them.
So I didn't catch, are there 2 weekly seminars?
There are 2 weekly seminars.
Okay.
And they are generally, so far, during my time here, they've been on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and they are at lunchtime, so that it takes a little time. Some fellows complain that, it breaks their workday, but it's really the only time that we find works for fellows, for example, who have children and can't do the late afternoons or so.
Yeah. And I'm wondering about point of career in which someone applies for this fellowship. It seems like it's more senior, but I noticed with academics, it's not everyone is, say, full professor. So what is the status that you think is best for?
So we welcome fellows at all career stages. There are application requirements. So I think someone have to have had a PhD. I don't remember if it's for 3 or 5 years, but, all of this is going to be on the web. All the details are going to be on the website. But, after a first period of postdocs and junior faculty, we accept people, associate professor, assistant professor, senior professors. We have people who are really junior in their career, but they show incredible promise in the work that they've done. And we have emeritus professors that come as part of the fellowship. So really there is no age limitation. What we are looking for is excellence in the work that they are proposing to do and in the work that they have done so far.
So, of course, listeners, as you kind of just hinted, are wondering, what are they looking for? And I guess you're saying, is a CV should show sort of interesting publications at top-notch journals and university presses? Is that part of it?
Yeah, so we define, excellence first and foremost is what we tell our reviewers. And this is we define excellence in a few different ways. So we look at the significance of the project in the context of the disciplines that the applicants submit their application in. And we also look at the ability to undertake the project. So what is in the application or in the resume that tell us that this person will, complete the work that they're planning to do. We look at demonstrated professional accomplishment. So, if there is, a first book or articles that have been published in particularly good journals, we definitely look at that. And then, as I mentioned, we look at a mix of well-established scholars as well as we call them rising stars, and anything is fine in that.
And what have you found with the stage that the project is in? Is there an ideal, should you be able to say, I will likely be finished with this by the end of the year? What's a good point?
Yeah, so one important thing to remember is that we don't hold, so I think that the fellows that the selection process select are all incredible. They're really high achieving, brilliant, whether scholars, artists. And so we don't really hold people accountable to what they said that they would do. And that is simply because also during the course of the fellowship program, they may hear things from other fellows. They may have conversations with other fellows that can change the course of their project. And so this is important. We don't ask you at the end of the fellowship, have you published a book, these articles? That's not part of our ethos here. And also any stage is actually, we've seen it kind of all. So we have people who present a project that basically says, I'm looking forward to coming to Harvard to dive into the archive and start on this book project that I have in mind to do for the last 5 years, but because of teaching, I couldn't, right? So really first, beginning the research of something. Mm-hmm. I remember a presentation by a historian who hadn't done any research. And so her presentation was about, okay, this is what I'm hoping to do. And it was at the beginning of it. So yeah, very, very initial stage. We have people who are coming here who maybe have approached the end of a book project, and they come to write the last few chapters or to review the book that they have already somewhat assembled. And all of it is fine. And sometimes they come and say, yes, I want to finish up this project, but I also want to continue thinking about what's next for me in this area. And so it's time for them to think through and to, start looking at the archive and see what's there for the next project that they have in mind. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Is it necessary or helpful if an applicant is showing that there's Harvard archives that they want to use?
Yes and no. I mean, it's not. I mean, we welcome specifically applications that make use of the Schlesinger Library because it's part of our focus area. And if people mention that they're going to use the library, that's great. But for example, we have scientists who come, astronomers, astrophysicists who mostly come to analyze data with a very specific project in mind. Mm. They may or may not use the libraries, and that's fine.
Okay. When I was in grad school, I knew a professor who I guess was a fellow at the Institute. I remember, coming by to have coffee and just meet with him. And he was telling me how incredibly nice the circumstances were. Like he had a really nice office at the Institute. And I think maybe even someone came and brought him lunch or something. I don't know if this is still the situation. Do fellows get their own offices there?
Yes, so we don't bring lunch, but we offer lunch. So we are, I think, extraordinarily lucky. We are on a campus that is within we have Radcliffe Yard, has a beautiful green lawn in the middle and few red brick buildings all around. And the fellowship is housed in Barley Hall. And Barley Hall has over 50 offices for the fellows, and we allocate the office every year. And the fellows are welcome to use their office like 24/7 when they are, for the period of time that they are here, which is between September and May. And then between September and May, we pay them a stipend and some allowances. And then some fellows elect to stay on for June and July, but without pay. And they can continue to use the office and continue to use the libraries. So yes, the offices, every fellow has their own office. And on Tuesday and Wednesday, as I mentioned earlier, after the talks and the conversation after the talks, we offer lunch. And fellow either meet in one big room for lunch on Wednesdays, or they spread across the different floors of Barley Hall and have kind of small conversations with one another.
Very nice. Many of our listeners will be familiar with other fellowships like the National Endowment for the Humanities, the ACLS, and our humanities worlds. Those are very common. How is the Radcliffe Fellowship different or looking for something different, do you think?
I don't think I know enough for about the other fellowship. I mean, I think that there are a couple of things. So the first is that we accept applications in many, many different disciplines. It's by definition an interdisciplinary fellowship. And this is really the hallmark of the fellowship. And what that means is that I see it every year that when fellows have the opportunity to talk with colleagues that are engaged in other disciplines, their thinking really change. And at the very least, it expands and they realize that there are other worlds around there. But sometimes it really deeply changes how they think about their disciplines, how they think about the work that they are engaging in. So I think that is the most important thing. One thing that is probably the same as the other fellowship is that when we get to the end of the selection process, What happens is that we try to build a class that reflect the diversity of disciplines that we want, and that is part of all the work that Radcliffe does. But we also want diversity across institutions. We want Ivy League institutions, we want state universities, we want small colleges. And so, I mean, representative from these institutions. So we want diversity there. And so in order to build a class with these characteristics, a lot of the people that apply who could potentially be fellows, who have all the credentials, who have made it to the final selection stage of the process, are not going to be accepted. And so if someone is confident that they put in a really good application, then they should reapply. One thing that I would say is that I have heard before from people who have applied multiple times and they finally were accepted. And some of them said, my previous applications were really not worth Radcliffe. And so I understand now why I wasn't accepted. But, my last one I thought was good and I got in. So I think that it's important to keep in mind that you may have made it, but not quite, with a perfectly excellent application, but also that the reviewers may have seen in between the lines of the uncertainty of the projects that were proposed.
That's really helpful to hear that it sounds like it's not uncommon for people to apply more than once. I'm curious, are people able to get any kind of feedback if they end up getting a no?
Yeah, well, no, the answer to that is no. And that's simply because of the number of applications that we receive. So we receive anything between 1,100 to 1,600. Like the year before last, we got 1,600 applications. And so we don't have the staff to, we wouldn't just simply be able to do it fairly for everybody. And so we don't provide any feedback.
And to help listeners out a little, are there any, areas that you often don't get enough applicants in that for diversity's sake, you're kind of looking for, whether it's political scientists or a region of the country?
Yeah, so there are a few areas that we have been focusing on over the last few years with some degree of success, I would say. So one is economists. We welcome economists in the class and scientists. So we receive many more applications in the humanities, social sciences, than in the science, mathematics, and engineering. And partly we think it's because people that have a laboratory may find it hard to leave it behind. And so we understand that, there is always going to be a discrepancy, but we do welcome applications in this area.
Some of our listeners are not traditional academics, are independent scholars, or a little more creative nonfiction writers. Are these areas where you also you accept fellows from those
Absolutely.
areas?
And then, artists in poetry, playwriting, visual arts, film and video making, creative writing, yes.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you have anything to say about areas or things that you see folks getting kind of wrong with the application.
We're very lucky. I mean, a lot of the applications are very good, but we see people submitting applications that have some of these aspects that are not good for reviewers. So one of them is sometimes people submit projects that are about developing coursework for a college degree, and we don't accept that. So what we are looking for is novel, innovative, groundbreaking thinking and work. Sometimes proposals are just poorly written. And so, the reviewers do comment on that. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes the research and academic questions are not well formed, well thought through. And so while someone may have a sabbatical coming up and so they put in the application, I think that it comes through that the thinking is not really crystallized in the way that we need it to be. Sometimes the methodology is poorly defined or not explained at all. And I think that our reviewers are thinking, okay, how are you going to go? How is this applicant going to do what they say they're going to do? What is the practical, the methodology with which they're going to achieve the goals that they've set out? And sometimes projects can be either too broad or too narrow in scope. And this is kind of hard to define, but we want, big thinking and big ideas, but we want them described in a way that says, okay, this is the idea, but this is what I plan to do at Radcliffe and why Radcliffe is going to be transformative and essential for the work that I plan to do. That's very important. So explaining why Radcliffe, why not anywhere else? Why in an interdisciplinary class?
That seems challenging for folks to know, because every year there's just some sort of amazing chemistry, and it's like the applicant can't predict that I'm going to have the good luck of getting to have a conversation with a novelist and an artist, and that's really going to shape it. But I guess folks might, I'm trying to think what they can say that'll make clear why Radcliffe would be specifically helpful.
Yeah. So it's not unusual, for example, to read applications where someone mentions being part of an interdisciplinary group in the past and how they benefited from that. If they haven't, I think that looking at the range of fellows that we had in the past, kind of imagining, we always have scientists in the class. We always have some creative writers in the class. We always have some historian in the class, some poets in the class. And so, imagining how the chemistry and the interactions with this individual might help the project, it's important to let us know.
I know people often wonder about recommendation letters. For instance, is it helpful to have a former Radcliffe fellow who might know you or your work well and know sort of what that fellowship is like? Is that something you recommend?
I think it's important to have obviously good recommendations letter and to have recommendation letter, because one of the things that happen with applications that may not make it is that they don't have the recommendation letters, or they have one instead of three, or, recommendations letter we still think are important. And whether the recommendation is by a former fellow or not, it may be that the former fellows explain why the applicant is particularly suited for the fellowship, and that's somewhat important, but it's not essential. It's not, we understand that some people had the privilege to have a former fellow write a recommendation letter, and someone who doesn't shouldn't be penalized. And so we accept all recommendation letters.
I'm curious, too, if the fellowship has any kind of alumni, or after the fellowship, is there continuing contact or network?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started recently with the Radcliffe Fellowship Alumni Association, and we have started with a newsletter for them. We organized an event which is called Stories in Scholarship, where, in essence, it's a book talk, but it's a book talk that it's built for alumni, for Radcliffe alumni, because it goes much more in detail into the archival work, how the project was developed, and the first one we did was for a book. And so what was the reception in the public, and why, and what the issues were, etc. So it's a book talk with that is built for the kind of audience that is not for a general audience, it's for fellows specifically. And we're planning some other activities like the writing group. So we find that every year the fellows convene in writing groups that can take many different forms. Sometimes they're just accountability groups. I'm here to write for an hour, and I'm here and not somewhere else. Or they are really groups where people read each other's work and give each other feedback. And so we've reached out to alumni fellows to see if they have an interest in, one, participating, but also in leading the book talks. And we were lucky that a couple came through. And so we will start soon with this continuation of the writing groups that start here in the fellowship.
That sounds great. Since you've seen many classes of fellows by now, I'm curious if you have picked up on things that have been helpful for academics to have a good fellowship year. Many of our listeners have fellowships like the Radcliffe Institute, if not that one. And what do you see working for your fellows?
So I would say a couple of things. So the last few years in the real world have been really difficult. And so I have seen that fellows have kind of sometimes brought into the class the tensions and anxieties that are out in the world. And while that is completely understandable, I think that it's somewhat important that everyone remembers that the fellowship is only 9 months, and that for some people it's really precious time. And after that, they have to go back to their 4 courses a year. And so just keeping in mind that it's a very short time. And while the world is on fire, we are trying to do our best to protect the time that people have been given to do the work that they're passionate about. And then the other thing that it's important is the collegiality. So being open to conversations that sometimes might be uncomfortable. It's very important that people agree to disagree. So one thing that we do, I wanted to mention a couple of things. So the first one is that we do part of the orientation that I mentioned earlier, the 2 weeks of orientation. It's really dedicated to building a community, to have conversations about, okay, what would make this year at Radcliffe fantastic? What norms and intentions and rules are we giving ourselves, the fellows, to make sure that this year is lived in the name of respect and collaboration and interdisciplinarity. And so we guide the fellows at the beginning of the year in this work. With that said, so one other thing that I want to remember to mention before the end is the Radcliffe Research Partnership Program. This is a very important program that is also part of the fellowship. And basically what it is a program that pays Harvard College students who apply for the program to work with a fellow. So each fellow can potentially hire up to 3 college students to do meaningful academic work, which can be research in the archives, read a chapter that they've written and get feedback, or collaborate on the projects that the fellows have presented. And so we see project moving faster because of the work that the Radcliffe partners do, but also fellows getting feedback on their written work that they wouldn't get otherwise. So and we hire around 100 students every year. So it's a very enticing program for both fellows and students. And students come back on different projects year after year. So it's very, very good for them.
That's a great resource. Thank you so much, Claudia. This has been really helpful and interesting.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Writing It, the podcast about academics and writing, sponsored by the Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Florida. Visit our podcast description to find out how to contact us and send us your questions about academic writing and publishing. Follow us on social media at Writing It Pod and subscribe to us so you never miss an episode.